For the last few years, being a Miami Dolphins fan has got to feel like riding the world's most exciting and yet most frustrating roller coaster, right? You see these flashes of absolute brilliance, and then they're followed by just crushing disappointment. A team that looks like they could beat anybody in September just kind of limps into January. But what if all of that is about to change? Today, here on NFL Nexus, we're not going to look back. We are jumping 2 whole years into the future, to 2026, to explore how one single monumental draft could be the moment the Dolphins finally get off that roller coaster and start building a real dynasty. This isn't just about picking players, folks. It's about resetting an entire franchise's philosophy and its future. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around the magnitude of what's at stake here, we're going to break this down into 4 critical parts. First up, why the heck do they need such a drastic, kind of painful reset in Miami? I mean, what led them to this point? Second, what can they learn from the teams that are actually winning championships right now? What's the modern blueprint for success? Third, and this is the fun part, we'll get into the weeds and map out a step-by-step game plan for that 2026 draft, looking at positions and maybe even some specific players. And finally, we'll look at the razor-thin margin for error here and why this new front office is literally betting their entire future on one single weekend.
And that question right there, that really gets to the heart of the matter. It's the question that probably haunts the front office of every single team stuck in mediocrity. How do you actually pull this off? I mean, it's easy to say rebuild, but what does it really mean to look your fans in the eye and tell them, hey, we're intentionally getting worse before we get better? Well, it means tearing down a roster that had some big-name stars, clearing out all the financial wreckage from past decisions, and trying to build a winner that's sustainable, not just for one season, but for a whole decade. For the 2026 Dolphins, this isn't some thought experiment. Now, it is their brutal, necessary reality.
So, let's start with part 1, Miami's big reset. Before you can build a new skyscraper, you have to demolish the old building, right? You got to clear the entire foundation, you have to get right down to the bedrock. And that is exactly what is happening in Miami. This is all about understanding the context, the really tough decisions that led to this moment, and the clean slate they are desperately trying to create for themselves. This right here represents a massive, massive philosophical shift. You got the new leadership duo, head coach Jeff Hafley and GM John Eric Sullivan, and they aren't just rearranging the furniture, they are gutting the entire house. They took one look at a roster that was loaded with these massive backloaded contracts, and they realized, as our source material puts it, the bill was going to come due. So instead of just kicking that can down the road again and mortgaging even more of the future, they're choosing to rip the Band-Aid off. They're basically absorbing all the pain in their very first year, clearing out the bloated salary cap so they can build something that's sustainable, something that's truly theirs. It's a painful process for sure, but it is an absolutely essential first step in any legitimate rebuild.
And their way is built around this one really critical idea, the defensive arms race. I mean, just look around the league. Quarterbacks are making $50–55 million a year. Elite receivers are getting paid like they're franchise QBs. You simply cannot afford to pay top dollar at every single position anymore. It's impossible. The new market inefficiency, the new path to a championship, is to build a defense that is loaded with young, cheap, athletic monsters all on their rookie contracts. You have to be able to disrupt guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen without completely breaking your salary cap. And that's precisely why they hired a defensive mind like Hafley, and that's the clear mandate for Sullivan. Go find the weapons for his side of the ball.
Which leads us right into part 2. See, if you're going to embark on a journey this risky, you don't just wing it. You've got to do your homework. You study the teams who have actually made it to the top of the mountain. So what lessons can the Dolphins learn from the teams that just played for a championship? What's the modern blueprint for success? And more importantly, how can they adapt it for themselves?
And what's really fascinating when you study the final 4 teams from last season is that there isn't just one single magic formula. This slide shows you 4 different blueprints. So take the Rams. They basically ignored high-priced free agents on defense and built their entire dominant defensive line through the draft, hitting on mid-round picks. It's a total high-wire act that requires an elite scouting department. But wow, the payoff is huge. A cheap, ferocious defense that lets you spend big on your offense. Then you have the champion Seahawks. Their philosophy was different. They targeted what our source calls game-wrecking positions, a dominant defensive tackle who can just collapse the pocket from the inside, and these ball-hawking defensive backs who create turnovers. The Broncos, they chose a hybrid model. They signed proven veteran linemen to anchor the defense and provide leadership, while drafting and developing a young, athletic secondary behind them. And the Patriots? Well, they did what the Patriots do. They built an identity first, the Patriot way of communication and physicality. And then they supplemented it with a key veteran signing like Milton Williams to fill a specific, crucial role.
4 teams, 4 totally unique paths to the top.
So if the paths were all different, what was the common DNA? Well, that's what this slide is all about. When you boil it all down, despite all their different strategies, every single one of these elite defenses had these core archetypes. They all had that monster in the middle of the D-line who commanded double teams and just wrecked an offense's run game. They all had a young, explosive edge rusher who could absolutely terrify opposing quarterbacks on third down. They all featured a game-changing slot corner, a position that's become incredibly valuable as offenses use these spread formations and RPOs to attack the middle of the field. And they had a true number 1 lockdown corner on the outside who could just erase the opponent's best receiver. And crucially, they had the right culture, mixing hungry rookies with savvy veterans to lead the way. This isn't just a list of good players. For the 2026 Miami Dolphins, this is the shopping list.
So now we get to the fun part, part 3, the 2026 game plan. We've seen the why behind the reset and the what from studying the champions. So now let's dive into the how. How do the Dolphins take this blueprint and actually build their new team? And hey, just a quick pause here. If you're finding this breakdown valuable and you like this kind of deep dive, the best way to support NFL Nexus is to hit that subscribe button and maybe drop a comment below with your own armchair GM plan for the Dolphins. It really helps the channel a ton. Okay, back to the war room.
It all starts with this one beautiful number, 11. The Dolphins are projected to have 11 draft picks in 2026. Let's really put that in perspective for a second. A typical draft class is around 7 players. This is like getting a draft and a half in one single year. It's not just an opportunity to plug a few holes. This is a once-in-a-generation chance to completely redefine the culture, the talent level, and the entire financial structure of your franchise in one weekend. The opportunity is absolutely massive, but the pressure to get it right, oof, it's got to be suffocating.
But look, this isn't a video game where you can just spend all your points on defense and totally ignore the other side of the ball. As this slide shows, GM John Eric Sullivan has to perform an incredibly delicate balancing act. On one hand, yeah, he has the draft capital to find his starting edge rusher, his lockdown corner, and more. But on the other hand, the offense has been completely gutted. I mean, imagine a team without Tua Tagovailoa, without Tyreek Hill, and without Jalen Waddle. That's the reality. You have to find a new quarterback, new receivers, new linemen. You can have the 85 Bears defense, but if you can't score 17 points, you're not winning many games in the modern NFL. The source calls for cautious aggression, and that perfectly captures the tightrope he has to walk.
So how do you walk that tightrope? You go in with a clear, disciplined plan, especially early on. This is the logical path our source material lays out for those crucial early rounds. With their top pick, number 11 overall, you attack one of the 2 most important positions on defense besides quarterback, a premier edge rusher or a true shutdown cornerback. Why? Because these are the players that are nearly impossible to find, and they cost an absolute fortune in free agency. You build through the draft at these premium spots. Then, with your second first-rounder at pick 30, you circle back and you grab the best player available at the position you just passed on. You leave Thursday night with 2 blue-chip, foundational pillars for your new defense. Then, on day 2, you hunt for that high-impact slot corner, a position where, as we saw with the champion Seahawks, you can often find incredible talent and value outside of the first round.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. The source gets into specific names to watch. At edge rusher, there's some buzz that Miami's own Reuben Bain Jr., a hometown kid with a relentless motor and pro-ready power, could be sitting there for them at pick 11. At cornerback, guys like LSU's Mansour Delane, with his elite size and length, and Tennessee's Colton Hood, known for his fluid hips and ball skills, are seen as legitimate first-round talents. But the real wildcard here is Caleb Downs from Ohio State. The source notes that while taking a slot corner this high is a little unconventional, a player like Downs is so versatile, so elite, and so dependable that making him the foundational piece of your new secondary, well, that could be a franchise-altering splash move. He could be their version of Minkah Fitzpatrick or Tyrann Mathieu. And this quote from the source really brings it all home. This draft strategy provides Coach Hafley with youth at critical spots. Now, that's not just a buzzword. It means he gets talented, coachable players who haven't developed bad habits yet, guys who he can mold into his specific defensive scheme from the moment they walk in the building. He gets to build the culture from the ground up with his guys. And for a GM like John Eric Sullivan, this is familiar territory. He was part of the front office in Dallas that drafted Micah Parsons. He has seen with his own 2 eyes how one transcendent defensive talent, taken with a high pick, can completely change the trajectory and identity of an entire defense. He knows this plan can work because he's seen it happen.
The plan is logical. The blueprint is crystal clear. But that brings us to our final and maybe most sobering section, no room for error. Because for all the hope and all the potential we've just discussed, the stakes of this single draft could not possibly be any higher. The entire project rests on this one weekend.
Let's be crystal clear about what happens if they get this wrong. If the 2026 draft class is a bust, if they pick the wrong guys, if the players don't develop, there is no plan B. There is no undo button. You can't just try again next year. The financial and roster-building consequences are so severe that the only way to recover is to fire everyone involved and start another painful multi-year rebuild from scratch. For Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan, their entire legacy in Miami, their very careers, will be defined by the handful of names they write on some cards during one weekend in April.
This slide puts the stakes into stark numerical terms. If the Dolphins make all 11 of these picks, roughly 20% of their entire 53-man roster will be rookies. Think about that. 1 out of every 5 players in uniform on Sunday will be on a cheap 4-year rookie contract. This is a staggering level of turnover. But more importantly, think about the power that gives you. It's a massive foundational overhaul not just of the team's talent, but of its entire financial health for the next half-decade. It's the ultimate competitive advantage if you hit, and it's the ultimate anchor if you miss.
And that brings us to the two futures, the two completely divergent paths this franchise can take, based entirely on the success or failure of this one draft. If they hit on these picks, if they find starters and solid contributors, those 11 cheap rookie contracts create a war chest of salary cap space. It gives them the freedom to go out in free agency and be the biggest spenders, buying the proven veteran pieces they need on offense to make a Super Bowl run. But if they miss, that cap space just vanishes. It gets eaten up by expensive, washed-up veterans you have to sign just to plug the holes left by your busted draft picks. A successful draft builds a dynasty. A failed one creates a purgatory of mediocrity and financial hell.
Which leaves us with this final fundamental question. Is a championship defense built or is it bought? Well, the truth, of course, is that it's both. But the Miami Dolphins are making a very specific, high-stakes bet. They believe that if you can successfully build your core through one transformative draft, you will earn the right to go out and buy the final pieces to put you over the top. They are choosing to build the foundation before they buy the furniture. And the entire future of their franchise depends on them being right. Thank you so much for joining us on NFL Nexus for this deep dive. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let us know in the comments, what would you do with the Dolphins 2026 draft? And hey, if you want another way to support the channel, we've created a series of coloring books. They're perfect for kids, grandkids, or even for adults looking for a way to unwind. You can find the link for those right in the description. We'll see you next time.